welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is Jonas, and with me today is Dennis. And this is going to be our second try at filming our Friday the 13th rankings video because Dennis was very unhappy with his last one.
Yeah, I sure was. We recorded it, spent 45 minutes on it, had a good discussion, and then I went home and I second-guessed it, watched the whole series through, and I have a lot of changes. So that one might not make or might not see the light of day. Because I think it would upset a lot of people, and it upset me. So John was gracious enough to give me a second try.
I am a gracious man. I'm a gracious, humble host. So we're going to be following top 10 show rules. So I used to watch a podcast called The Top 10 Show, and they just did top 10 lists. And they had rules where essentially they would trade one apiece, and if like one of the films was higher on the other person's list, they would punt it, and they would talk about it at the higher point on the list. Seems simple enough. Did this show with Matt a couple times, and he just could not wrap his head around that. So luckily, Dennis, slightly more intelligent, so he kind of got it the first time I explained it to him, like most people seem to get. So we're going to just count down our top 10 Friday the 13th films. And Dennis, what is your number 10?
So my number 10, and this is one that actually previously did not make the cut, because two of the Friday films will not make it since
there's 12. They never got to 13, which is just incredible.
Yeah, real swing and a miss on that one.
14 years, they could have just put out one.
Maybe one day.
I'm hoping.
So my 10 is Part 5, A New Beginning.
Ooh, where do I have that on my list? That is way higher, so that's a punt.
All right, your 10?
Friday the 13th, the original from 1980.
All right, that is a punt. It is higher on my list as well.
Figured that. So what's your number 9?
Number 9 is Part 7, A New Blood.
That didn't make my list, so that's one of the ones that I had to leave off because that's Friday the 13th Firestarter. And this is the one where she gets telekinetic powers, and it's a really, it's still got the 80s stuff, but it just doesn't work. But it's your choice. You go for it.
So, yeah, and I remember from our last discussion, and honestly a lot from our last discussion, I went in, rewatched, and took a lot of what we talked about. And this one was higher originally. It is lower now at number 9 for me because you're right. It is pretty rough. The acting is rough. The telekinetic powers, weird. The doctor guy is a dick. The whole story is just bizarre that she brings him back to life by being mad at her abusive dad, and it's weird. The reason it is 9 and not 10 is Part 5 was actually a good movie. You were not wrong about that. It was good, but we'll get into that. This one was the first appearance by Kane Hodder.
This is the one
I looked it up to confirm from our last discussion, and Part 7, A New Blood, first Kane Hodder, and I think he's awesome. I think he just is like that guy who played Jason really, really well, and I think that gives this a little bit of a nudge.
He definitely has the best mannerisms of Jason, especially compared to the early Jasons where they're just kind of walking around and you're like, well, that guy's just a big dumb idiot.
No, so that's why it made 9, just because of Kane Hodder, and I'm 99% sure that's correct, but obviously throwing this out in the public forum. If I'm wrong and he is from Part 6, I apologize, but I'm pretty confident Part 7, Kane
I just
Hodder's
watched Jason Lives, and I did not see his name in the credits anywhere, so I'm pretty sure you're right. So that means that my number 9 is Jason Goes to Hell. Now, did that crack your top 10 yet?
So, we can talk about it now because it did not.
So, you rewatched this and it still didn't make your top 10?
Did not.
Wow. Okay. Well, I have defended this movie in the past. Now, this is a very, very bad movie. So, what happened was, after Part 8, Jason takes a ferry to Manhattan. They decided to sell the rights, Paramount, to New Line Cinema, who owns the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. And this is the first film they put out. Kane Hodder is in this movie, but they decided to throw all logic and any continuity that they had in this franchise just out the window. Basically, Jason is, I guess, an entity that gets transferred through the big giant worm that goes body to body. Now, all that stuff is extremely stupid. There's a character in this movie called Duke. I kind of like him. He's a bounty hunter. Strange guy, though. I have a lot of questions about why he dresses the way he dresses. I guess he heard bounty hunter and he thought, oh, well, they were big in the 1800s. I'll dress like a cowboy. And in this movie, the violence, though, is really good. And I also really like how this movie is shot. And the ending, the very end of the movie with Freddy's hand coming out and grabbing Jason's mask and taking him to hell and setting up Freddy versus Jason 10 years later.
Took a little bit to get there.
Yeah.
I did take your advice and I rewatched it.
Good.
And I went in with an open mind because before I really dunked on this. I hated this movie so much. I thought it was the dumbest thing they've ever done. And it is still the dumbest thing they have ever done. I don't think that you will even deny that.
It's by far the dumbest thing they've ever done.
I'll say it's shot well. I think the opening scene with the undercover officer in the cabin and then blowing him up, like that whole thing was insane.
I have questions about that, like how they lured him in there. They had an entire team of agents come out there. They had to get this girl to come in there and be like, oh, you know what he's really into? Women who look like you. So we're going to put you in there. And he's not going to want to fuck you.
Yeah.
But he's going to want to kill you. And that's what we need.
Yeah. And then I was thinking that too, because I'm watching it, like, you put this undercover cop in here, and she, like, takes a pretty major spill off, like, a second floor balcony through a table.
She was close to death. Like,
yeah.
She was very close to being killed.
So I think, one, they botched that. But my other question is, they literally set up 1 million floodlights. There were, like, 300 police officers outside, machine guns, grenade launchers. So was Jason in that house and they knew that when they set this up? Or did he just walk by that line of people to get in the house? And they let him in first. They were like, no, let him go and let him think he's going to kill this woman. Then when he comes outside, we'll blow him up.
It just lets you know that Jason, at the very end of things, is a fucking idiot. So, like...
yeah, that's fair.
He's easy to catch. He's just very hard to kill. And in this movie really shows that, because you think he's dead. Like, I mean, the guy eating the heart, like, he's just looking at it like, oh my God. That looks delicious. And then he just goes in on it.
No, there's a lot of that. And then they threw in that he had a sister who had a baby, and the baby, God. It just, they went...
What about the sand hands coming in from hell?
Oh my God, yeah. They went well beyond... And listen, this whole series, as with all slashers, there's a lot of leaps in logic, a lot of holes, but you overlook it because for the most part it's not that glaring. It's like, all right, we could kind of forget that. This one has so many leaps, and it's just, like you said, it takes everything that happened in all the movies beforehand and said, nope, those don't exist. Now, this is what Jason is, and it was a huge miss for me.
Oh, I get that. I'm one of the minority in the people who like this movie, but I also can fully admit it is an atrocious movie. It's just from an entertainment standpoint, and just sitting there thinking the whole time, like, how did this get made? It really is impressive. So, what's your number 8?
My number 8 is Part 2.
Part 2. Yep. Well, that's a slight punt, because my number 8 is Jason X.
That will also be a slight punt for me.
Okay, well then that brings us to number 7, where we can just talk about Friday the 13th Part 2, because that's my number 7.
That's your number 7. All right, so since it's your number 7,
I'll take the lead on this one. So the reason why I like Part 2 is this is the first time we actually get to see Jason. And I also think that this one is kind of well made and well shot. Like, I really love the opening of this movie where we just see Jason's boots. I mean, I don't know why, like, that one kid, like, pulls up to him. No one questions why a guy in a burlap sack and overalls is walking around with one eye hole. But I love seeing the leaves around his boots with the wet street, and he goes in and kills the girl from the first one, because this is where that all got started. Where let's kill the hero, the one survivor from the last movie.
Yeah, why not?
Let's just cut off any loose ends. And that's the thing about Jason. He never leaves any loose ends.
Yeah, he sure doesn't. He is not afraid to get in there, and, you know, everyone's like, oh, the last girl, hooray. You know, I think that's the horror trope, the final girl.
Yeah.
Jason looks at that and he's like, yeah, you'll get away this time.
Yeah.
But not forever.
We're ending this movie, but we gotta cut you off at the beginning of the next movie.
Yeah. I agree with you, though. I think it was shot really well. And it is only, you know, this is your 7, my 8, so I think you'll understand when we get to my 7. But I like this one because, again, it's Jason. The only reason it's so low is, and we had this discussion before, could they have picked a smaller guy to play Jason?
I know. The guy who plays Jason is really not good in this movie. This is what I'm talking about, especially in the early ones and even in Part 3. The guys who play Jason are just not great at all. And this is also the one where we find out that Jason has a lair and a very nice shrine to his mother's head.
Yeah.
And I actually like the third act of this movie, too, because it's really just a one-on-one fight between him and that girl for about 30 minutes. And she comes up with a good idea. She's like, you know what Jason really loves? His mother. So I'm going to put this sweater on and I'm going to try and soothe him. He almost falls for it, but, you know, it comes around.
Yeah, no, and I think that you're right. I think this is the first time, it's first time we see Jason, and it's, I mean, also the first time we get this trope of his, which everyone in every subsequent movie tries to do, the Jason mommy's talking kind of thing to fool him.
Oh my God,
and he always almost falls for it, but this girl did it good, throwing the sweater on, talking to him. The whole thing was done very well. And I do think this was a final girl scene that you're like, yeah, all right, she kicks ass, she runs, she hides, she gets the better of Jason a lot of ways. So I do think you're right. The last act is really, really well done. I think this movie was shot better than the first. I think a lot of the story's a little bit, not necessarily, it carries over, but a lot of it is just a little bit better in my opinion. I think you get that, because technology gets better acting and camera work, and the story develops a little more. So it does get a little bit better, but again, I just can't get over. I mean, the guy who plays Jason had to be like 5'2", 97 pounds, and just the part where he like runs into the room and like really does like this with his one eyeball at the camera. You look at that and you're like, you want to laugh. You're not like, oh my god, you're like, oh, all right, dude.
They clearly didn't have even like an idea of where they were gonna go with Jason yet. Not until they get to 3. Like they were gonna probably try and commit to this, and then I think enough people are like, well, why does he have one eye? And because they literally abandoned that whole one eye thing in the next movie. Like he's got 2 working eyes, but in this movie when he pulls his mask off, you're like, yeah, no, that right eye, it's pretty fucked up.
yeah.
So that's my number 7. And did you say your number 7 yet?
No, my number 7, which we can talk about now because I believe you had it already, is the original 1980.
Okay, so this did move down your list a little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah. Now I have this at 10 mainly just because it's directed by Sean S. Cunningham, the original Friday the 13th director who worked with Wes Craven actually on The Last House on the Left.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. That movie's also just a lovely romantic story.
Honestly, we have a lot of lists coming up, and Last House on the Left and I Spit on Your Grave and those kind of movies were in the area, and I can't even talk about them because they are just violent and they get into some territory that it's not, it sounds wrong to say this, but watching people get like stabbed and cut up and shot by, harpoons and all that stuff, I'm like, all right, whatever. But some of the stuff that happens in like Last House on the Left, I like do the old kid like plug your ear, cover your eye kind of thing. I don't want to see it.
Because it feels real.
And uncomfortable.
Yeah. I have a movie, when we get to our 70s list that we'll talk about in our future video, I have a movie that's like that, but it wasn't The Last House on the Left.
Yeah.
But the original Friday the 13th, it's just a straightforward slasher, and everyone always assumes that the killer is Jason. It's the Friday the 13th franchise, but no.
Yeah, no, it ends up big surprise if you haven't seen it. Spoiler, it's his mom.
Pamela Voorhees.
She is pissed because all the counselors were fucking her son was drowning. So she's back, and she's back with a vengeance. I think this movie, I think it part of my top 5 when we originally spoke. It dropped a little bit only because, you could tell like, it was low budget. God. They didn't know what they were really doing. A lot of the effects, I'm a big proponent of actual physical practical effects. Like I know you did a video recently reviewing a movie where you mentioned that too. Like practical effects is way better than CGI. But some of them in this, you see clearly like, okay, that's not their body.
Oh, the worst is Kevin Bacon. And Tom Savini, who's the king of practical effects, did this movie.
Yeah.
And like when you can tell that it's like a dummy body when the thing goes through his neck because the skin doesn't match his head. Like you could see the fade into the fakeness, and you're like, okay, I get it. It's 1980. That's probably, and they had no money. And you could just tell also that like when they're doing the kills and it's all in the first person shot, and it's just like, all right, I'm going to set the camera up. Just act really scared, and we're going to put 5 minutes of this in the movie.
Yeah.
Just to fill time.
In that first one, we get the kill on the woman. She's like in the bathroom, I think, right? And
I actually kind of like the lead up to that with the rain outside.
Yeah, that's great. But the kill itself, where she just like grabs the wall, she's like, yeah, and just waits to die.
Yeah.
Instead of like kicking, punch, nothing. She just sits there and waits to get killed. And I'm like, some of that stuff takes me out of it. It still is a little higher up on the list because it's the original. It started it all. It'll always have a special place in my heart. But it did drop significantly from my top 5 to my 7 slot because it's just kind of, it's older, and you can tell that they kind of were just throwing everything at the wall to see what stuck at this point.
The twist ending helps it work, and then also child Jason coming out of the water and grabbing that girl, which again, I have no idea how he's like 12 years old in this movie, and then he's like 35 in Friday the 13th Part 2.
Yeah, a beautiful kid. Looks great coming out of that water.
He's doing well for himself.
Yeah, really. He lived under that lake
for 30-something years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
So, doing good, but it dropped a little. But with that, what's your number 6?
My number 6 is Freddy vs. Jason.
That is a humongous punt.
Okay, what's your number 6?
My number 6 is Jason X.
Jason X. Well, that is, where was that of mine? That was number 8, so we could talk about that now.
All right, so this was originally a little higher. I think it broke my top 5 as well the first time we spoke. Just outside of the top 5. However, I still think that it's better than all the ones before it because this is just one of those movies where it knows what it is, it knows what it's doing, and it doesn't care. It is almost, it's like kind of where Jason is in that comedy act, where you're watching not because you're scared of him, but because you just want to see him kill some people. And they really dive headfirst into that.
Oh yeah, that's basically what this movie is like, you know, it's weird how this movie exists. It came out in 2001 before Freddy vs. Jason, but after Jason Goes to Hell. There's no reference to either of those movies. This movie is just a standalone Jason movie where basically he got sent to the future because he ended up on this spaceship and they didn't realize he was there. Then they defreeze him and, you know, people were having sex around him or something that kind of like set him off. Like he's like, oh shit. Like, are they doing what I think they're doing? They wouldn't dare. Yeah. They know who I am, right? I have 3 bugaboos. You know, don't do drugs, don't have sex, and, you know, especially don't do it in the woods around me. But you know what? I don't got any woods.
Yeah, no, dude, it's so bizarre. I think, so it starts off with, like, Earth, and they have him locked away, and then people want to, like, take him to study him. He gets frozen in the cryogenic accident, and then, you know, it's like the year, I don't remember, like 2346 or whatever.
It's ridiculous.
They revisit Earth, find his body, bring him back, and they're, like, thawing him out. And I think you're right. I think some of the students were, like, making out and getting ready to bang, and just as, like, then you see, like, his fingers twitching.
Yeah, exactly.
He's like, I can feel the sex in the air as he's coming to life. And then he just goes to town. I mean, the one kill where he puts the woman's face in the tub of, like,
oh, I love that.
It freezes it.
Like
dry
nitro.
ice.
Dry ice. Nitro something. Yeah. It makes it super cold enough to freeze her.
Yeah, freezes her and then smashes it, shatters it. That's hilarious.
The sleeping bag kill, which is a throwback, which is on the future planet where they have it like fucking set up to look like Camp Crystal Lake, and this is where we get Jason and future Jason with the fucking cool ass mask on.
The robot or the cyborg Jason. All steeled up and everything.
Which lets me know that these filmmakers knew what movie they were making, which is an over-the-top cheese fest, and that's all you're there for, is for the entertainment, because if you're going for a logical story, there is no logic here.
No, and I think that's the reason it fell out of my top 5. It's still high up, because honestly, you watch it, it's a good time. You're gonna enjoy it, it's hilarious, but this is one of those ones where, like you said, it's not a part of the series. It's a standalone. You have to go in not expecting anything to tie into past or future movies. Jason X is all on its own. It's a good watch, but if you're looking for, like, something to continue and push farther along the story, it is not for you.
That's not this film.
That's why it dropped a little bit and is not in my top 5.
All right, well, the first one in my top 5, and I know you're going to say punt to this one, Friday the 13th, 09.
Yeah, no, big time punt as well.
Yeah, I figured that. So what's your number 5?
So this was your number 5. I'm going to just write that out here so that I know when we get to it. My number 5 is part 4, the final chapter, where we first get Tommy.
All right, well, that's a punt for me.
Okay.
So what's in your number? Well, then we're at my number 4. And this is Friday the 13th, part 3, or part 3D.
Ooh, tiny little punt.
Okay.
Tiny.
So what's your 4?
My 4 is part 6, Jason Lives.
Okay, well, that's a punt.
All right.
So then my number 3 we're up to then, right? Is Friday the 13th, part 5, A New Beginning. So you see that this is very high on my list.
That went from my 10 to your 3.
Yeah, and I understand that I'm one of like 6 people who like this movie. And let me explain. So first of all, this movie, actually just had a review of this movie come out today. This is about Roy the ambulance driver, not Jason doing the killing. So Roy, he has a son. He seems to be a little bit mentally challenged. He's living in an orphanage. Somehow Roy lives in the same town driving an ambulance. He doesn't check in on his son. His son doesn't know he exists. But he knows about Roy. And he knows about his son. I think his name was Joey. And Joey, or whatever his name is, gets killed by this guy Vincent with an axe. Puts him down. And then Roy shows up and he sees his son's dead body. And this sets him off. He's like, what? My son is dead? How am I never going to see him again? And he's like, okay. Well, now that's it. You know who I'm going to take the place of? I'm going to take the place of fucking Jason. Everyone blames Jason, and they'll believe it's Jason, because Jason always comes back to life. But I'll do a little bit of changes. I'm going to take the red off the mask. I'm going to get some blue stripes instead, and I'm just going to do the exact same thing Jason does. So then basically he goes on a killing spree, this guy, killing out everybody. Juana Man, a bunch of other people get blown away, like guy driving a Dodge Charger, a Challenger, really nice, with a porn star mustache, doing coke in the car. Like, this movie, why I like it so much, it feels like an 80s slasher movie. Right down to every single trope. It's just a lot of fun. And you don't really need Jason in a lot of these movies. Jason's just an entity. He's just walking around killing. You can really put anyone in those suits. So I kind of actually enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah, so that's actually, this was one that didn't even break my top 10 when we first spoke, but now it did break it at number 10. It's number 10 because it doesn't have Jason, and I know that that's kind of nitpicking because he does wear a mask and he is killing everything, but it's not Jason, and it really is kind of, again, like we talked about Jason X, a standalone, where it's not really, like, there's no connection between, to me, we had this discussion, part 4 with Tommy and part 6 with Tommy. 5 is just kind of in the middle. It's not continuing any story. It's just kind of there. He's kind of in it, but it's like the mute thing, and you know, it's just
the
weird.
Tommy thing is really pisses me off in the middle of these movies. Now I love the Tommy Jarvis trilogy. The final chat. Actually, if you look at it, those are my top 3 movies. But Tommy is played by somebody different every time, and he's played different every time. He's played by Corey Feldman in the first one, and, well, part 4, and then he's played by, I don't know what this guy's name is, who never speaks in this one, and then he plays the kid from Return to the Living Dead in part 6, Jason Lives, and each time he gets a little bit older, but these movies came out within 4 years, like all 3 movies within 4 years.
Yeah.
So I'm like, he doesn't even, like, there's no continuity here. And that's the biggest issue. And 5, they just completely ignore. They pretend that movie just doesn't exist because so many people hate it. And I get it, but I don't hate it.
I don't mind the twist ending of it not being Jason, and that's why it ended up in my top 10, because it's not a bad movie. It really isn't. A lot of the kills are crazy. The storyline is fine. I just feel like what comes after it really diminishes it, because then the Tommy story after is so much better that this movie almost shouldn't have even had him in it.
No, I don't understand why they did that, other than to have a connection to Jason in the last one, because they do have Corey Feldman at the beginning of this movie.
Yeah.
Like, to show us that, like, that's Tommy. Tommy's eventually going to grow up and he's just not going to speak anymore.
Yeah, and I think had they done something a little different where maybe they... Tommy maybe was just in the beginning, or maybe not even in the beginning. Maybe you go through all this stuff and you just have this whole story happen exactly how it happens. And in the end, you have maybe a clip of Tommy in the psych ward and he sees the report, oh, Jason killings or whatever, and then that sets up 6. I don't think you need him as a mute, sitting here terrified of everything. I just don't think it adds. I think it takes away from the Tommy story. But again, I really don't think it was a bad film. That's why it did jump up into my top 10 finally, because it really is, it's a good movie. It's really enjoyable. It's totally fine to watch, but I just don't think it's worthy of, what is this, your number 3 slot?
Yeah.
That's a little high for it.
I get that. So what's your number 3 then, if you're gonna...
My number 3 is Part 3D. So that was the slight punt.
Yeah, that was very... I like Part 3D, but why do you like Part 3D?
So in rewatching it, this was a little lower on my first list, but... I guess I was a little harsh based on memory. The Jason... Now listen, Jason doesn't really come into his own until like 6 or 7. You know, I think 6 he gets to be zombified, and
that's
7,
like
8, 9... Yeah, he gets to be a monster. In 3D, he's not bad. I like he gets his mask, and obviously the 3D effects
are awful.
Just the corniest things you've ever seen, but... It's still Jason. It's the first time we get hockey mask Jason. And I think that if you're someone who's looking to get into Friday the 13th and, like, you don't care where you start, 3D is not a bad spot. Because all these films, you mentioned it in a couple of your other movies, most of them start off with the first, like, minute and a half is the last movie.
Yeah, they do a recap. And I actually like, they did this all the way through, I think, A New Beginning, and then they stopped doing it. And I think the reason is because in the early 80s, there was no VHS players or Betamax players yet. So if you missed the movie, and they only come out like a year apart, it's like, if you missed it, well, we'll recap what happens at the beginning, and then you're all caught up. And this is the movie, like, where they really start to get, like, the layout of what a Friday the 13th film is supposed to be. We meet our kids in the beginning, they're going to camp, we get this asshole Shelly who's trying to impress everybody, and he's just coming off really annoying and like a sad sack. That's why nobody likes me. No, nobody likes you because you're a fucking dick.
Yeah.
And then when he eats it, actually, I think he gets the actual mask from him. If
he
I'm
does.
Correct, right?
Yep.
So the original mask comes from this douchebag, and when he eats it though, like, and no one believes it because you're always the guy who cries wolf. They think he's faking.
Well, because there's that one scene, remember, where he like yelps or screams, and they come into the room, and he has like his throat cut, and he falls to the floor, and everyone freaks out. They're like, "Oh my god, he's dead!" And then he gets up laughing, and everyone's like, "Dude, you literally joked before with like a mask and a knife. No one thought you were funny. Now you're gonna pretend to be dead with these effects on your neck? Like, fuck off. We don't want to talk to you anymore." So then when he does die, he's like, and the one woman goes, Oh, yeah, haha, real funny. He just walks away.
Yeah, and then he dies.
Yeah.
But, you know, the 3D effects, but we also get like an 80s gang in here wearing leather and fucking
Love
bananas. And then they eat it too, but it's just that's leading right into all the 80s tropes, man. Like, these guys, they're mad because Shelley knocked over their motorcycles. So,
Yeah.
you know, that's a big sin in motorcycle gangs.
Yeah, do not touch the bike. All right?
No, and he doesn't get that.
No. Yeah, so I do think that's why it's my number 3, because genuinely, with the recaps in the beginning and stuff, this is where Jason, like you said before, it's Jason. It's the tropes, it's how the film's laid out, it's how he kills, how everything unfolds in every other movie after this starts here at part 3, in my opinion. So that's why it was my number 3.
That makes sense. So we're up to your number. So
Your number 2.
My number 2 is Friday the 13th, the final chapter. So this was where on your list?
That was my number 5, actually.
Okay, so you do like this one. So this was actually supposed to be the end of the Friday the 13th franchise. They wanted to end it. I don't know why. Paramount, for some reason, was getting embarrassed about these movies. So they bring Tom Savini back in to do the effects because he wanted to be the guy who killed Jason. We get Crispin Glover in here doing a ridiculous dance.
Dude, I rewatched it, and
Yeah, I don't understand.
Oh God, I got like a headache watching it. The whiplash that he puts into his neck is insane.
And why? And why do that?
I don't know, dude.
I don't know. I guess that's just the 80s. But I mean, that guy, the whole movie, he's just worried about getting laid because his one friend's making fun of him, who's the one who ends up not getting laid.
Yeah.
Which is really funny. You know, he's like, they call you a dead fuck or something like that.
Yes, yeah, the whole movie.
Yeah, and then he eventually gets laid. But of course, Jason does not take kindly to that. And one thing about this movie, it's really a continuation of 3. So 3, all the kills happen at the camp. Jason gets sent to the morgue. He wipes out everyone at the morgue, and now he's going back to Crystal Lake, but not going to the camp. He's going to like houses around the lake.
Yeah.
So these kids are renting a place next door to a family that lives here. One of them is the Jarvis family. So you got Tommy, his sister, his mom, and what do you know? Jason's on a killing spree again. And this movie, what I really love about this movie is numerous times Jason refuses to use a door.
Dude.
He blasts through walls. Like,
Yeah, and when you say blast, you are underselling because
the wood explodes.
yeah, it's not like he hits it. It falls off the hinges. He hits it, and this thing, you would think someone put some C4 in the middle and detonated, because this thing erupts into a million, and it doesn't even face him. He just like poof, and then just stands there, doesn't care.
Yeah, he waits and stares at them like, "What's your move now?"
Yeah,
I got inside.
yeah.
Where you running?
Yeah, but I mean, I agree. This movie, again, is in my top 5. Actually, the Tommy Jarvis ones, which I see where we're going now for your number 1.
Yeah.
That was my, 5 and 4 of these stories. Because I think of the entire franchise, the 2 best and most cohesive films are 5 and 6 with Little Tommy and then Not Mute Tommy. I think that, and this one it sets it up perfectly. I think it's still haunting, the image at the end where he shaves his head all weird and comes down, and we get the classic, which carries over into 5 and 6, the die scream when he's chopping him up. So much was set up by this film. And Jason, the characters played really, really well in this one again. I think that this film is solid, and I could see why it's up here for you. It's just I have a couple that
Don't get that high.
Yeah,
I get that. So what is your number 2?
My number 2 is your number 6, my friend, and that is Freddy vs. Jason.
Wow, this got really high on your list.
It did, and it's because I rewatched it, and I will die on this hill. This movie is fantastic. I know there are people who, again, will try to find holes and leaps in logic and all this stuff, but honestly, Freddy is sick in this film. He's all-time funny. Jason in this one, I think also he's not the zombified Jason we're used to, but I think he takes a really good form, and he's scary. He's got the dopey look with one eye open and whatever, but he's a big guy who just doesn't care and kills everyone. I think the story makes sense for Freddy to search the depths of hell for someone to help bring fear back, and he finds Jason. Totally makes sense to me. A lot of the effects are great in this when Freddy is pretending to be Jason's mom, and he's like, "They're gonna remember," and morphs back into Freddy. That was done really well. I just think overall this film, and it might be recency bias because effects got better and whatever, but I really think this film is just awesome. I know it's technically not a Friday the 13th film, but even if we did a Nightmare on Elm Street film, this one, like listing, this would be high up too, because this movie is just awesome. It's a great showing for both of them.
And one day we got to talk about the Nightmare films, because I think we lean the same way on those movies where they're ridiculous and all over the place. But yeah, this I think counts as both a Nightmare film and a Friday the 13th film. And I think you're right. The way while you were talking, I was thinking about it. Like, they kind of take like the best form of Freddy and the best form of Jason from the franchises, because they get a little too stupid with Jason by the time we get to like 7 and 8.
Yeah.
And then once we get to like the the Nightmare on Elm Street, by like 5, he's just a joke of himself, essentially. He's just a satire of what Nightmare on Elm Street Freddy Krueger should be.
Yeah.
But like in this movie, it's just a lot of fun. It's got that like blue early 2000s effect over everything.
Yeah.
The only thing about this movie is, and it's what you expect, the teenage actors are all horrible.
Yeah.
You're really there to see the fight between Freddy and Jason, and they live up to it. They fight in the dreams, then they fight at the lake, and really they both come out on top at the end, really.
Yeah, no, and I think the fight scenes between them, I mean, especially in, I guess it would be kind of the last act when they're finally at the camp and they're brawling, when everything's on fire, we get Jason blows through a wall here, I think. Not even a door, the wall he blows through.
Oh, he's blowing through things.
Yeah.
He hates doors.
Yeah, I think he walks up, sees the knob, and he's like, that's a sign of disrespect.
Yeah, like, just either you have it open or I'm gonna make a door.
Yeah. And that final fight is insane. It's bloody, it's gruesome. Even the deaths of the final people there, where the one kid gets thrown into the wall and he gets spiked by that shelving unit through his back.
Oh, there are some good kills in here. There's some really good. Obviously, I think the best kill, though, is the one in the bed where he splits the bed in half.
Oh,
my God, that is crazy. I've actually seen a making of it and how they did that in practical effects. Yeah. It's awesome.
There you go. I think that's one of the better ones. I think it's hilarious. Jason in the cornfield at the party when they set him on fire.
That's a great looking scene, because they do kind of have like a helicopter shot or a crane shot looking at the field, and I'm like, oh my God, that is perfect.
Yeah, so that's why it's so high up. I know technically it's not Friday the 13th, and I know it's the recency bias, and you could say it's cheating because technology, but genuinely, that's a film where if anyone sat down with me, again, just like I said, part 3, if they were like, what should I watch? I'm like, honestly, Freddy vs. Jason is definitely high up there. That's one of those ones that just, to me, it hits on all cylinders.
So that means that I just figured out what your number 1 is, and we're about to go to war.
Yep.
Because my number 1 is Jason Lives, which is by far the best Friday the 13th film, because this is pinnacle Jason, pinnacle 80s. This is when we bring Jason back to life. Tommy Jarvis, just couldn't leave him dead. He's like, I have to make sure, so I'm going to go dig up the body. And he fucking puts a spike in him, and lightning strikes him, and now worm-covered Jason comes back to life. And he's out there hunting again. I love the opening with the rain effects and everything. Like, it looks so cool. Then it goes into a James Bond opening where he cuts the screen and it's in his eye. And I'm like, okay, so they know exactly what movie they're talking about. And there's even some cool transitions because we get to see the kids at camp. And, we never see that stuff. I love all of that stuff. Jason is just huge and big and menacing. We get the Alice Cooper man behind the masks on. We get the head through the fucking side of the Winnebago, one of my favorite kills in the entire franchise. And then Jason again blowing doors up when the Winnebago flips, throws the door out and jumps out of the car accident and just keeps walking.
Yep.
The sheriff who doesn't believe anything, even though he's been proven time and time again. They changed the town's name. Still Crystal Lake, though. It's not Forest Green. I love this movie. I have to watch it every year.
So I agree, and this was way lower on my list. It is my number 4, and to be honest with you, it was close to being number 3 for me. But part 3D, he gets his mask. There's a lot to it historically for me that makes it a little higher. But this film,
I respect your decisions here.
It is, you are right. This is the film that I thought was first Kane Hodder because it's the first kind of big, imposing Jason. Mm-hmm. I don't think it is yet, but it definitely set the groundwork for Kane Hodder to step in. And I agree with you. I think this, like I said before, between part 4 and part 5 and 6, we could have cut 5 out. If we went straight part 4 to part 6, this little 2-film thing is peak Jason. I think it's fantastic. The storytelling's great. Kills are fantastic. Everything about it is fantastic, and that's why it is at my number 4. But it just couldn't beat out my number 1 because we've had this discussion, and I think it's superior. But I will give you, this film is fantastic. And to be honest with you, before we get into my number 1...
Oh, I'm ready for your number 1.
Most of all of these films, actually pretty much all of them with the exception of like my 9 and 10, could pretty much be interchangeable up to my top 3. They're all so good, and when you rewatch them, you really do realize, wow, you know what? Maybe I was a little harsh on this one. This one's way better than I thought. That, you know, they're all a good time.
All 12 of them, that's one thing that, even before we get into number 1, and I'm going to knock your number 1 like crazy, I still love all of these movies, all 12 of them. I think that they are the most consistent franchise in the horror genre, just except for the Scream franchise. Because the Scream franchise, all those movies are actually good, where you can argue these movies aren't all good, but they're entertaining, and they know what they are. They're just there for you to have fun. You're not supposed to, like, really dive too much into the logic and the continuity of these, because if you do that, you'll make yourself sick, because they don't all tie together at all. You kind of got to break them off into 3s almost. That's the way I break them off in my head. You got 1, 2, 3, 4 through 6, 7, 8, and then 9 and 10 are kind of, I don't know. Once you get after 8, it's when Paramount loses the rights, it goes really off the rails.
Yeah.
So
until you get to my number 1.
Yep, and I know that.
Which is
Friday the 13th, 09.
Yep. The remake.
I figured that. And I had this at, where did I have this? Because I did have it pretty high.
I think it was your 5.
I'm in number 5. And I really like this movie, actually. I really shouldn't say it's like worse than Jason Lives or anything, because like this really is a good movie. But you should talk about it, because I know you love this movie.
I do love it. And again, I know there's going to be a lot of purists out there, because my top 2 are Freddy vs. Jason and the 09 remake, which are the newest films, and recency bias and technology, all that stuff. But honestly, if you just look at this film, I really think they killed it. You cannot talk about acting, because listen, it's Friday the 13th. There has never ever been an Oscar nominee for any of the Friday the 13th
But
films.
I think you want the bad acting, and I think they kind of cheese it up on purpose with the teenagers in this movie. The way they are. I think that's intentional.
Yeah, and I think that they do a really good job of making them, you know, they have every stereotype. They got the nerds who want the hot girl, and the douchebag guy who cheats on his girlfriend, and then the mysterious stranger who the main girl falls for. All the tropes you can find are here, but most importantly, Jason is scary in this film. He is not an idiot. He is not some clown walking around looking like a doofus. He is big, he is imposing, and you learn that while he was living on his own in this wilderness, he was learning to hunt so that he could eat. So he's great with the machete, he's great with a bow, he's agile, he can run. He is a survivalist. He's not a zombie idiot, halfwit. He is a survivalist who is scared and pissed off at people on his property. That's basically what he is.
Don't blame him for that, by the way.
Yeah.
What I like about him, first of all, you passed by, but that one harpoon gun kill.
Oh, fantastic.
Through the eye. That's one of my favorite kills in the entire series.
Fantastic.
My biggest flaw with this movie is actually nothing to do with Jason himself. I do not like how this movie looks, like how it was filmed. I don't like the filters they put over it, but it's very much of the time. But Jason, I love that Jason can hunt, and that he's smart, and that he moves. Because you know what? We have 11 movies before this where we get to see dumb Jason.
Yeah.
I like to see Jason actually be a step ahead. Like, you've come into his environment now.
Yeah.
And you know what he's going to do? He doesn't appreciate that one bit. You know, we kind of combine a bunch of different things about Jason into one movie, and I really do appreciate that. We get homages, and I really do enjoy this movie, and I understand why it's your number 1. I kind of had a feeling this might go up your list, because I know you do love this movie, and that means we didn't talk about one Friday the 13th movie, which I guess dropped off your list too, because I think this was on it last time.
Not only, Johnny, and this is when I said that there was a surprise in store for you, not only was it on my list, it was so high on my list that you almost disowned me as a cousin, because it was like my number 3.
It was very high.
And it did not make my cut at all this time after rewatch.
And that's Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes a Trip to Manhattan. Because right? Did you notice all the leaps in logic in this? So Crystal Lake, it's called Camp Crystal Lake, but somehow they get from Camp Crystal Lake, which is in New Jersey. New York is not very far from New Jersey. It's actually very, very close. Yeah. So to take a trip from the lake makes no sense. There's no outlet. So basically the whole movie takes place on a ship, and it really doesn't even take place in Manhattan until the very end. Now, when they get to Manhattan, I enjoy this movie.
Yeah.
It's just that it's not a lot of the movie.
No, and that was one of the criticisms you had the first time we shot it, where I said, oh, Jason Takes Manhattan. You said, no, it's Jason Takes a Ferry to Manhattan.
Yeah.
So I get it. And when I rewatched it, you're right. If it's like an hour and 30 minutes, an hour and 15 is the boat.
Yeah.
And at one point the boat sinks. And they all leave, and they end up like I don't know, at the Statue of Liberty or Ellis Island, one of those things, and Jason somehow ended up... This guy must just weigh like 18 tons and just walk at the bottom of the ocean. Because you never see him swim.
No.
Like, is he breaststroking? Is he just regular?
He's never moving quick anytime you see him. Only time he ever moves fast is like he works up his just fucking anger and strength to blow through doors. Because he blows through doors in this movie too as well.
Yep.
Oh my God.
No, it's terrible. It's honestly, if you did want to watch this film, just fast forward till they land in Manhattan, because then it gets hilarious.
And it gets really good.
Yeah, he's like beating up gang. He becomes a vigilante almost.
Of course, they're not in Manhattan; they're in Canada, which is where they do a lot of these movies. Even Scream 6. Scream 6.
Oh, really?
It's Canada.
Oh, okay.
They always go to Canada. They never actually go film in New York because we live in New York, and New York is a very expensive state with very little tax breaks. So you go to Canada, and they'll take care of you. They'll be like, "Well, it's not New York, but it looks like New York," and it's like. Yeah, well, we'll fix it.
Yeah. No, and I mean, listen, it's fine, but again, of the entire franchise, the two that didn't make my cut were Goes to Hell and Manhattan, because those are ones genuinely you never ever need to see, and you will not be missing a thing about this film.
I mean, I agree 100%. The only one that missed my list other than Jason Goes to Hell was The New Blood, which was Jason's Firestarter. So that one, but you know what? To be fair, I haven't rewatched that one yet. I'm up to that on my rewatch, so that could possibly move up my list. But from the last time I watched it, which was a couple years ago, still hated it. But you never know; things change. Like your list got flipped upside down and spun around. So
yeah, completely different. And I want to say one more thing in closing about this, because I've been thinking about it a lot, because we talked about this remake and everything.
Okay.
And I want to spit to you my idea for the remake. Okay. Are you ready?
Yes.
I think you'll like it. So, Halloween, right? It got a new trilogy. Halloween, Halloween Kills, Halloween Ends.
I love the father-son story in Halloween Ends. Okay.
Right, we don't talk about that. All right. So, we are going to do a trilogy. It's going to be just like the 09 remake, but forget the 09 remake. We'll pretend whatever. We got to just disconnect from it. I don't think we recast the mom. I don't think we redo the whole thing in the first one. I don't think we need it to not be Jason. I think we just maybe show a little flesh in the beginning, like the 09 remake did, just to set the foundation for it. We get Bag Jason in the first one, goes on a rampage.
Okay. With you.
Kills everyone with his bag, just like part 2.
Okay.
Final girl, same exact thing. Part 2 of the trilogy. So that's it. That's the film. You get Jason in his bag head killing all these people at the camp and whatever after his mom was murdered. That's it. It gets its camp blood name, the whole 9 yards. Part 2, we get Tommy and his family, right?
All right, I like it.
Now remember, Tommy, and I don't know how they totally botched this, Tommy liked masks.
He did. He was making masks. That was his thing.
So make Tommy have the hockey mask. Forget that stupid goofball guy.
I know, that's true. I don't understand why. I mean, I guess, I don't know. The original reason why in part 4 they had the masks was as an homage to Tom Savini.
Okay.
So they were like trying to make a kid who was in the mask like Tom Savini was into the effects and special effects and makeup, so.
There's our part 2 for the remake. Tommy Jarvis making masks. But maybe he's got a couple. You could even, I mean, if you have the rights and stuff, you could throw like a little, oh, look, there's a Michael Myers mask on the wall. I don't know that you will, but if you could, whatever, Freddy's glove in the background, whatever you want to do. But make Tommy have the mask. That's pivotal, because then everything kind of follows suit from part 4 with him, right? Mm-hmm. And Jason, escapes the morgue, comes out. He's on his way to Crystal Lake, killing all these people in the rentals. Tommy is the one who foils his plan, but it's important that the hockey mask comes from Tommy, because that's going to be the tie. So Tommy now in part 3, after we think he's dead, gets out of the psych ward or whatever. He needs to make sure he's dead because he feels guilty. Because now he keeps seeing pictures and stuff in the news about Jason with one of his masks on. So Tommy feels this guilt, like, oh my God, I helped create this monster. The mask that everyone's afraid of is my mask. And it's a leap and a stretch and maybe not that important, but I like it as a connection.
I think it would actually work really well.
Then part 3, older Tommy goes to kill him. He's not dead. You could do whatever you want to do. What I was thinking to make him a little bit more scary and a little bit less doofy is maybe Tommy goes to the gravesite to see if he can, just to make sure he's dead. And maybe there's a bunch of idiots who are, like satanic worshipers who want to bring him back to life, and they do some sort of ritual on him. Because to me, then, if he comes back to life from like a satanic ritual, it makes sense why he won't die.
Yeah, no, that would, at least that way, and it does give us that logic. At least, I mean, obviously that can't happen, but at least it gives some logic within the film.
Yeah, so then and Tommy's there, just like in part 6, or 6, where he like is sitting there watching and he sees Jason come out of the grave. He sees these satanic guys sacrificing whatever, blood and all that, and Jason comes to life, slaughters them. Now the movie is Tommy battling the sheriff who's like, you lunatic, you're scaring everyone. Even go back to, we named it Forest Green, whatever. Basically do that story. Make the trilogy the Tommy Jarvis story that it should have been.
I agree. That's actually a great fucking idea. If you guys like that, get Blumhouse on the line and, like, come on, give Dennis a call. He's got some good ideas that could actually make the Friday... And people want more Friday the 13th. It's just been stuck in development and rights hell where everybody wants a little piece of this Friday the 13th. Which, you all get nothing if you keep fighting, so I don't understand the point of this.
Yeah, I really don't either. But I think that way it sets it up. It's a nice, neat little trilogy. Remake it so Jason's scary. And then this way, if you do decide, let's keep making films, it makes sense that he's alive because he was raised up by these satanic people, and you can carry that over. And I think the satanic thing, it adds a little bit more of like an edge to Jason. Instead of being like this half-wit dummy roaming around, he's brought back to life by evil forces from hell kind of thing, which I think will just lend itself nicely to him being a little bit of more of a force and a presence. And it also kind of helps explain away, by the time we get to, part 9 or 10 of the newest ones, why he's still alive.
Yeah, which we kind of just don't question that, and they kind of don't want you to question that, but it's nice if they can give us a logical reason.
Yeah.
I would appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, we hope you guys enjoyed this list. Let us know your top 10 lists in the comments section below, and then while you're down there, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, head out to your local lake, and hopefully don't get killed by a serial killer. And while you're there, tell your friends about us and the serial killer, and we'll be seeing you around.